Blair Sinta. Welcome to the Recording Drums podcast. I was at number 83 on Apple Music Podcasts this week, which is pretty cool, I think. I don't really care, but they send me a thing in the email, and it went way up. So thank you guys. Thank you all. I shouldn't say guys. Thank you to whoever's listening. And keep spreading the word. It's, I've said this before, but the whole thing I'm doing this is just trying to spread information. There's no monetary kickback for me, but it's, the thing for me is just talking to people, learning things, and transition to Mike Dawson this week. Mike, many of you may know him from being at Modern Drummer Magazine for a very long time. And now he works for a company called Drum Factory Direct. And Mike is king of reviewing gear. He's doing amazing things by reviewing gear through video. And he records. And if you don't know Mike through Instagram or YouTube or anything, he comes up with incredibly cool sounds. And because he's reviewing a lot of stuff, he's using different gear constantly. So cymbals, drums, types of wood, microphones too. So we get into all that stuff. He has a really unique insight into all this stuff from being able to go through so much gear and, not being personally held onto it, but really just trying to get an objective opinion on what works for certain situations and what doesn't. So don't sleep on this one. This one's, Mike and I, we get right into it. And he just treated his room with this place called Audio Mute, which looks really interesting to me. It's kind of intriguing, and his room looks beautiful. Mike Dawson doing awesome things. Happy Independence Day, if we can call it that, these days. Courses are for sale. I think I'm going to put them up for sale this week, so check it out. Big sale, holiday weekend sale, because that's what you do. Lots of courses for sale. I'm gonna have my class beginning in the fall. I'm looking at early September. If you are interested in my 6-week recording class, please go to my website. You can get all the information. It's under DRX, Drum Recording Expert. It's a 6-week class, 2 hours a week, through Zoom from your home studio. I've done it once before. I feel like it was very successful. You can ask personal questions about your studio. I'm going to go from, drums and cymbals to minimal miking to complex miking through EQ and compression, through the business side of things and how I run my whole world over here. So if you're interested in that, you can get on my mailing list or my waiting list and spread the word about that, please, to friends also. The class is going to be limited to a maximum of 20 people on Zoom because I don't want it too big. I want it to be personal. And I've also added a payment plan, so that may be helpful to some people, payment plan on this one. So coming into September, I don't have an exact date, but early September, Drum Recording Expert is coming back. All right, let's get to Mike Dawson. It's brand new, you said?
Yeah, when did I get this done? It was in May, I think. Audio Mute came in and treated the room for me.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been super nice. There's like no room sound. It's just nothing, which is cool.
And I see you're standing. Are you standing?
Yeah, standing desk. Man, I had a standing desk.
I kind of want that. I'm kind of ready for that. I don't know if that's going to happen, but
I haven't sat down for work since I moved here.
Oh, wow.
It's been a year and a half, so I only sit down for like meals and when I'm playing the drums.
And you dig it?
Yeah, I had to get one of these mats so my feet wouldn't get burned out. But yeah, I have like nagging back pain, so if I sit down for more than 15 minutes, not at the drums, it bothers me.
Right.
So this helps. Yeah. And plus, I just feel like I can be mobile. I don't need a chair in here or anything.
Yeah, that's cool. I have one of these exercise ball things that I sit on.
Ooh, interesting.
Which is really cool, except if I'm not really great about my posture after a while up here, if I do slouch, it starts to kill me up here, man. What's
that supposed to do? Help your lower back?
Just supposed to like make you sit up.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And like a handful of years ago, before I got this, I'd be working and I'd be like, and I was like, okay, I gotta do something that keeps me like going. You know, it's all the heroin.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? It's got to keep.
We ever tried it on the drums?
I haven't, but that would be an interesting experiment.
Yeah, I don't know if you could. Can you lift your feet up when you're sitting on that? I think I'd fall over.
I think you'd have to have some. Your core would have to be pretty rocking. Well, that's cool. So tell me about the walls, the Audio Labs thing. That's really cool. And
yeah,
give me the whole process. Did you decide on the material, like the sound that you were going for, or like how does that work? Oh wait, let's talk about this Expos hat because that's a dope hat.
Yeah, man.
And my son's little league team this year was the Expos. So
no way. Yeah. How did they get an Expos team in Little League? That's a throwback. Goodness.
Yeah. Well, I think you can pick any MLB team, and
past or present.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm an old school. I mean, I guess not super old school, but Andre Dawson and Tim Raines were my favorite players, and then
Gary
a little
Carter?
bit later,
Originally
Gary Carter. Yep. A little bit later, Delino DeShields. I was a leadoff hitter in Little League, so Tim Raines was my idol.
There you go. Right on.
Yeah.
All right.
So anyway, Audimute is the company, and
drums in Little League baseball. It's very unique.
Yeah. I have met Mitch is the owner, and he kind of runs the show there. He did Carter McLean's space.
Oh yeah.
So I met him through Carter, and
Okay.
I said, I moved into his house. Like, I got this office, and it's a 12-foot box,
Okay.
So the drums sounded like horrendous.
Okay.
And I had one of those Clear Sonic ISO booths, which was great for isolation, but it just took up so much awkward space in the room.
Right.
I couldn't really film anything.
Probably not that fun. Yeah.
It's not that fun. It was cool because I could play like all hours of the day at night because no one could hear anything. And this is probably about 50-60% reduction.
Okay.
So not quite as soundproof. But so anyway, I reached out to Mitch. I was like, I got this space. Let's design something. And I told him my budget. And they had the material from a previous studio that didn't get built out. He's like, we have this blue stuff. They call it blue haze, I think.
Okay.
So, and I was like, I absolutely love it because I wanted it to look kind of like a Van Gogh or something anyway.
Yeah.
And so they just designed it up, sent me some options. I picked one, and they came over and installed it in a day. That was it.
In a day?
Yeah, like 5 hours of work, really.
Whoa.
It's like 1.5 inch thick. He says they make it out of recycled paper.
Okay.
So it's 1.5 inch thick, like fake wood planks with that. What looks like wood is actually a printed fabric. So it's super light, and you just put it up with a brad nailer, and no big deal.
So I'm just doing off Instagram. So Carter's studio, where it looks like wood, it's not actual wood.
It's the same exact stuff. This
No
Custa
kidding.
wood is what they call it.
No kidding.
Yep.
Wow. And they did the ceiling too, because the ceiling looks dope.
Yep. He put some. You can go up like this. He put some polygons above the drums, and then behind my computer here.
Oh wow.
So it's not like dead. It doesn't feel like a vacuum, but there's just no reflections. Yeah. Which is crazy.
Okay, so you went from the little ISO booth thing to that, and like what did that do for your, like, was it like a learning curve, or was it immediate like, oh, now I have options, sonically?
Yeah, the ISO booth was, as expected, had a lot of low end build up and stuff. It kind of felt like you were in a closet.
Right.
So I just kind of dealt with it. I just kind of dealt with it. Just let it be what it was. I wasn't trying to track in there. It was just for teaching and practice and stuff. But when I got this, all of a sudden, like, I could hear all the bad tuning decisions I'd made. It was really, especially on toms.
Okay.
Because there's no reverb to.
it.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, there's something wonky going on there.
Okay.
So a lot of experimenting with tuning, and just because the drums can kind of overwhelm the small room still.
Okay.
So different tuning techniques with the bottom heads, maybe a lot tighter than I normally would, just to shorten that sustain. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the first, because the morning that they came over, I played a Roy Haynes solo that I had from memory in the empty room. Yeah, and then at the end of the day, I played the exact same thing without changing the drums at all. And it was like, whoa, those drums that sound like a totally different drum set.
Wow.
It was really wild. So tuning has been the biggest thing. And this past week, I've been changing snare drum heads, and I've probably done like 20 drums of just, what does this drum want to do in this room?
Oh,
Where should it be? Which has been fun.
And they did the floor too?
No, the floor is just a laminate. I mean, I've got a rug down.
Right. Okay. Oh, cool.
So the floor is pretty live, and the ceiling's not completely treated. You can see it's like half.
But that helps. So I'm sure with
a ton.
A low ceiling, just kind of.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not noticing any flutter or anything like that.
It's really nice looking, which is like aesthetically, as you were kind of saying, like it's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, I was originally, when I first reached out to him, because you can see it over here. These are what they call acoustic sheets. That's just covering a big window. Okay. So I originally contacted him. I want to buy a bunch of these acoustic sheets and just cover all the walls. He's like, nah, don't do that. He's like, let us design something for you.
There, right? Well, the thing is, part of it is like we spend so much time in these places. Like one of the reasons I have like daylight here is because I know how much time I spend in here, and if I don't have that, it's a bummer for me.
Yeah, I didn't want to cover the window, but filming so many videos in here, I couldn't. It was too iffy if I was going to get blown out light or not. Because I wasn't worried about the sound. Because over here, it's just a courtyard that goes to nowhere. Okay. But I was like, I want the natural light so I can use that for filming. I don't have to have so many lights in here, but it was just too inconsistent, so I had to cover it up, unfortunately. Because it was nice and bright. But not anymore.
You just adjust throughout the day or whatever.
Yeah, putting up a black curtain that I had to pull back and forth when I was interviewing people. Right. So these can come down, but they're I think them as permanent. They're like heavy. They're probably half-inch thick, but heavy. Like it was hard for me to hang them.
Oh wow.
So it blocks pretty much everything.
That's really interesting, man. I know my room's like really well at this point, but the idea of that to me is really interesting because I know it could sound better, even though I kind of like know what to do in there. But it's making me think.
Yeah, well, I did this office first because I work in here and I do all my podcasting and practicing in here, and I needed a space to practice. But the main room is on the other side of that wall, and it's 3 times as big. So I was like, all right, let me wait a year or so before I commit to treating that room properly, because it's a long corridor, and it's it can sound like Steve Albini real fast. Like it's hard for me to control it in a lot of ways.
That's good.
Which is cool, but not everybody wants the room to be slapping back like that.
Right. So. There's a couple things like with you in particular. So you've, because you're a Modern Drummer so long and doing gear demos and things, you've gone through so many drums and cymbals and things like that. And you obviously know things really well. And I'm curious. I mean, you have such a because of that, you have such a deep knowledge of, probably different woods, different metals. Different symbols. I can't. It's got to be like mind-boggling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I figure I did 3 or 4 reviews every month for 17 years. So do the math.
So, I mean, I want to explore that. I'm not really sure how to explore that in a certain way, but like to me, that's fast. Like, are there things that you? Well, let me ask you this: are there things that you knew? Wait, I'm going to step back even farther.
Okay.
So at first you were writing, like pre-YouTube,
Mm-hmm.
pre-whatever, right? You were just writing about these things.
Yep.
So you had to like figure out how to put like what you were hearing into words, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, my strategy was to think of musical context. Like,
Okay.
what is this drum designed to do? What type of player? What
Okay.
price point? What is that? What are the expectations on pricing? And then what are they kind of saying it should do? And then I would reference recordings of that style or whatever, or players that play that way or who might actually use this drum, see how they were using it.
Okay.
So I tried to be as
Real world.
is that subjective or objective as possible with each piece. So then I could kind of evaluate it in that way. If it's supposed to be for rock and roll, then I know there's a certain volume thing and a power and a presence. But if it's so that was my crash course on how to learn how to do this, because I wasn't trained to do it. I just was like, hey, you're taking over all the reviews. Cool. I was hired to be the education guy, but all right, cool.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So it was just a lot of listening and researching, checking out what other reviews were out there on that product, and
Oh wow.
certain things I might be like, well, I don't think, because I could see the press release for a drum or cymbal, and I could see what other writers had basically just either copy and pasted or slightly rewritten.
Interesting.
It's like, you didn't really test this all the way. So I made a point like, all right, if they're saying it can do this and other people haven't taken it to the next level, I'm going to see, can I push it
Okay.
beyond just it's supposed to be bright or whatever. Like, what is it supposed to do? So, and then I'll try to always take stuff on gigs at the time.
Right.
Because in the practice room and on stage is 200% different experiences with almost everything.
Yep.
So I just tried to be as thorough as possible. And then eventually I got to a point after many years of like, I can almost tell right away what something is, if it's doing what it's supposed to do.
Just by like hitting it a few times.
Yeah. Just how easy does it work? Does it, just what are my hands and ears and body telling me from 5 minutes with it?
Interesting.
I would still test it, for a week or so, but it got to be pretty quick. Like, I could tell like a cheap plywood versus a good quality plywood pretty quickly, which is kind of strange.
And how about consistency between, like, let's say types of wood, like mahogany kits, consistency versus maple, or whatever. You know what I mean? Did you start to hear that like immediately? Like, not immediately, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was learning that birch is just a category. Maple is just a category. Mahogany is a category. So Brazilian mahogany and African mahogany are not the same wood. Yellow birch and red birch, they're not the same wood. So the cheaper stuff gets into cheaper drums, and you can feel it and you can hear it right away. Mahogany is definitely the big one. Philippine mahogany is just Luan, essentially.
Oh, wow.
So anything as cheap that's made with mahogany, it's really just Luan, which can be cool, but it's not going to be the big, dark, fluffy sound of African or Brazilian mahogany.
Oh, wow. So if you got something from, let's say, a credible drum company, and they were like, it's Filipino mahogany, you already knew that it was kind of going to be a piece of crap.
Yeah, it's cabinet wood. Basically, it's cheap cabinet wood.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's interesting. Okay.
And you can hear it. It just sounds thin. It sounds weak. Which could be cool. I mean,
everything has a thing,
cool.
which is, we'll get to there, right? But
right.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had like crash course on species. That was the big thing. Like, again, no fault to these companies. They're trying to market this stuff to be as good as possible, and they're not going to tell you that this is just Home Depot plywood. Right.
We're not outing anybody here. But now everybody has some extra insight to like.
Yeah, and then like steam bent versus stave versus block shells versus thin plywood shells versus thicker plywood shells.
Okay.
And then the quality of the glue, all that stuff starts to add up to where you can see it, you can feel it, you can hear it, but For me, it was more like you can feel the vibrations more or less.
Okay.
The better quality of the drum, I could feel. I was like sitting inside the sound. Versus the cheaper drum, it felt like it was just kind of dispersed everywhere, right away, and it's like, I'm just not getting the visceral excitement from this thing.
And then did that mean that, like, were you ever surprised recording something that you were like, oh, this sounds like crap, or it feels like crap, sounds like crap to me, but you put a mic on it and you're like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, and the opposite too. Cool. Yeah, the opposite too. So yeah, the stuff that like oak to me doesn't feel good to play.
Okay.
It just doesn't.
It's very hard, right? Oak is very hard wood.
It's hard, and it just, again, it shoots out away in my experience. So you feel like, to me, I feel like everyone else is getting the sound and I'm not getting it back.
Interesting. Right.
So it's not my favorite to play, but it records amazing, and it's great on stage. It's unbelievable on stage. So that's one that I was surprised. I don't even know who makes
an oak drum kit.
The Yamaha Live Custom is oak.
Okay.
There's been Yamaha probably the most prominent for oak.
Okay.
And then the opposite, like some really high quality, multi-$1,000 kits that kind of like feel awesome to play. And I put mics on it. I was like, man, these mics don't know what to do with all this information. It's just too much sound. Especially like steam bent kits, things that are just real beefy. I found the mics are just like, I don't know what to do with all this. It's just too much information.
So maybe they're great in kind of unamplified situations.
Yeah, or minimal mics or something like that. But a close mic, it's just like too much. Or the room, like my old studio was a small basement, and I take these solid shell kits in there, and it just, like, I could feel the walls were like, I don't know what to do with all this sound. It's just too much.
Wow, that's really cool, man. That's a super unique perspective. Wow. What are your personal favorite types of wood? I mean, obviously it's going to be for different situations, but
yeah, it's a good question. I have I just got a maple gum kit made by Bucks County.
Okay.
And he's been experimenting with different combinations of species forever, and so when I got that, I was like, dude, that's the sound, man.
Yeah.
Like you can't top that. It just becomes variations once you just different flavors. It's just perfect.
I played a maple gum kit from DW for a few months. I had the same thing. I was like, wow, this is everything that I want.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too much of anything.
Yeah.
And then I have a mahogany poplar that I call like my minor key kit. It's just anything that needs to be moody and dark, it's just right away, dialed right in. But it doesn't project.
Okay.
So it's not something I would use for hard hitting or touring or anything. But so yeah, mahogany poplar is all time fave, and then maple gum, which that's the Ludwig and the Gretsch formulas. So
yeah,
you got your two flavors.
Yeah. How about with snares? Like I've always when I was young, I was always like, oh, wood snares. And then the more I started to record, I was like, nah. 9 times out of 10, wood snares don't work for me recording because they just don't. It's hard to explain. It's hard to put sonic things into words sometimes, but they just don't speak. Even a great sounding drum, it just does not speak through layered sounds, I guess.
Yeah, that's been my experience too. I think, especially when you talk about plywood versus solid, I will always go for a solid wood drum over a plywood drum. Mm-hmm. Unless it's like a vintage 3-ply that I just want to be really wild and crazy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I found the same, like wood drums feel like they kind of hit like a bazooka, like you get or a laser beam. Mm-hmm. And if it's not the right frequencies or not the right combination of frequencies, I find it's a little bit anemic. I do like it live for that reason sometimes, where I feel like it's just kind of punching through and there's nothing kind of spraying around. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, I'm not a huge fan of plywood, but I do have one right here that. Let me grab it. This is a maple drum that I hadn't played in years.
Okay.
That I found its happy spot, which is a lot higher than I ever would.
Okay.
So for me, wood drums are good for high tuning. Like they do something like where some of the metal drums that I love, if I tune them too high, they kind of bite my ear in a way that I don't like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where I keep them, a little bit higher, unless I'm going for the super low thing.
Right.
But yeah, metal, I mean, shoot, of all the gigs I've played in the past couple of years, I've probably played an acrylite, either 5 or 6.5, more than anything else.
Yeah.
It just always works. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
it's hard to argue.
Yeah.
Sometimes brass is too much sound for me. And then steel it's like, well, again, a laser beam. If I'm playing, I was in like a hard rock band, steel was the sound. It just needed to be a gunshot.
It really works like that. Yep, I agree. Yep. And
but yeah, give me an aluminum drum and I'm happy for life most of the time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I have one acrylite that I've had for a long time now. I got it for $75, and it's been on tons of stuff.
Yeah. How do you tune yours?
So it's interesting. I had 2 at one point, and the one I'm talking about, I sold the other one because this one works anywhere.
Mm.
And I originally liked it because it was when I kind of got into tuning low, and I was like, wow, this thing just sounds awesome. But it still had a focus.
Mm.
It wasn't like too flabby or whatever. It had a nice low bottom, but it wasn't like too poofy.
Mm.
And I played it in a band that I played in for a while. That was the main thing. But now I have it a little more mid. I like it super high too, and the thing I like about aluminum is that it doesn't have like the nasty high end. Still slightly it's not piercing.
Right. Yeah, that's usually my problem with like brass. When you get it really high, it's just bites in a way. And then so what about 6.5-inch Superphonics? I've been spending the past week tuning all my drums to see what they do in this room. Mm-hmm. That drum for me is the one that wants to go low.
Mine, I do both.
John Bonham sound.
Yeah, I mean, I just think Bonham when I hear that when I do that. So I keep mine medium to high with a clear black dot on it.
Right.
But I do like it low. But the thing I think about Superphonics 6.5 is like there's like a it's almost like a scooped sound. To me, it's not as girthy. So it's very, and I think that's why it's so identifiable in recordings. You're like, oh, that's a Superphonic. Like, I can just hear it. Because there's something, I mean, I hate to talk frequencies, not being masterful of them, but like somewhere in that low mid, it's lacking that a little. In like,
and you like that?
Cool. Well, for certain things. For certain things, I think it's really great. But I also know when it's wrong. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like there's with that drum for me, it's a very particular like this is definitely the thing for this, and this is or it's definitely not. Mm-hmm. So I have like my Keplinger Steel 6.5. I have the Drum Paradise, the Hewer Hitmaker, which is nickel over brass, I think, or black, right? Black
nickel, yeah,
over brass, and then the Supra, which is also 6.5. And those 3 to me have very separate applications. They all tune great in different ways, but they have different sounds. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how I think of them.
Interesting. My my 6.5 Supra is the one that I don't get tons of comments on snare drum sounds, but that every time I use that's the first thing they say. What is that snare drum? Use it on everything. I'm like, all right, it's one I got out of a dumpster in high school, but sure.
Talking about Instagram.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I just find that whenever you tune up high on Instagram, people immediately go, "Oh, that snare is great." It's like, I mean, it's almost like
You just, okay, people are gonna like this. Yeah.
Yeah, drums by themselves versus drums with other people is very constantly evolving. I started gigging a lot more the past 6 months, and again, my tuning approach is completely different now because it's just not the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you're an excellent tuner, from what I know of you. And that's obviously probably from doing it so much with the reviews, right?
Oh yeah, every day. I mean, I'm tuning drums every day, and even when I don't have to, it's kind of become just a meditation where I feel like let me just change a drum head and get just enjoy it.
Really? Because I hate drum heads.
Well, I got a drill bit from Evans that.
There you go. That changes everything.
It changes everything. So yeah, I think years of practice, just like anything else. I mean, I'm sure I've put near 10,000 hours of tuning over the time, because every kit would come in a box with no heads on it, and you have to start from scratch. And then I try to test every kit at least at high, medium, and low. With different combinations of, both heads the same or bottom head a little bit higher. So,
okay.
And always rechecking every time I would make an adjustment so it wouldn't be out of tune. So yeah, it was just some days I would spend all day just tuning drums for work.
Wow.
That was my job.
Yeah.
So it got to be pretty quick.
I lost. Well, first of all, like my head is like, can I see that drill bit? Like I want. Because you're making me think.
It's right here, man.
Wow. So you just keep it loaded up, the battery, and like you just.
Yeah, it's just the Evans drill bit.
Okay.
And this sucker, I'm going to tell you what I've been doing recently. This is who makes this thing? Black & Decker.
Okay.
Lithium.
Okay.
20 max volts. So I set it on 1, which is the lowest setting.
Yep.
I mean, I get the head on finger tight, and then I just go around gradually because when this thing hits a certain tension, it won't tighten anymore at that level. And I found
the bit,
the bit will just stop. You'll hear it.
It knows.
Yeah, you can hear it. Like it just won't go anymore. And I've found, this has been a recent experiment. I would not recommend this to anyone who's not very experienced at tuning drums.
Rental caution right here.
I've found that setting on this particular drill is the perfect high tuning for every drum. And it's different. Like a 6-lug drum is going to be way lower than a 10-lug drum. But it's put, every time I've done it, it's put that drum in its max perfect high tension. So then I don't even have to fine tune it usually.
That's some nerdy shit. I love it.
So then when I'm messing with it in here, I just slowly back it down until I find that sweet spot where the drum opens up. There it is. I mean, it's changed everything. I'm not using the TuneBot as much anymore. Occasionally just a reference where I like it to remember.
That was my next question. Are you mainly an ear person or?
Ear feels a big thing these days. I can kind of feel in the tension rods where it's happy.
Okay.
And I always use the TuneBot as a reference, mainly when I get a drum where I like it.
Okay.
Like where is it sitting, and then I just write it on the head or mark it to remember.
Okay.
But yeah, I've gone through the whole using chromatic tuners and all that stuff. Drum dials, they all work, but I guess the older you get, the more you realize it's just respond to what the drum's giving you. Does it sound good or not? Take it up or down and adjust.
Okay. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a, I don't know, purist, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I just...
Doing by ear?
Yeah. I mean, technology is great, but when people are like, oh, what are your TuneBot settings for that thing? I'm like, dude, I've never used one. My thing, you know what I mean? Like I like, my experience, just traveling and having to get my sound on different drums is like it's just all feel and sound, and I just have a process, I can
it's helped me
in your situation though, where you're dealing not only every day but different pieces of gear that you're totally unfamiliar with, and you got to get to the point.
Yeah, it also allows me to say I tuned these drums exactly the same, so I know,
Right.
where does this brand's 12-inch tom choke out versus this brand's 12-inch tom choke out? Where does this shell type open up? I can say I'm very, like, we just did a test here for Drum Factory Direct where we got all of the snare wires, like 30 or some different versions.
Wow.
So we built out 2 identical snare drums, like 2 steel drums with the exact same hoops and same throw off and everything. And then I had to make sure they were tuned exactly the same. So there are no variables other than we just started swapping wires.
Okay.
And I'd use 2 drums so I could do it quicker. I could do 2 at a time and change them out.
Okay.
So, I mean, for that, I needed to do that. I needed to have down to the frequency, down to the 10th of a frequency accuracy, just so I wasn't hearing that it sounded more responsive because maybe the bottom head was tighter or something.
Right. Interesting.
So yeah, that's the nerdy level. And the conclusion with that whole test was you could barely tell the difference.
See, that's good to know. Because I've never been a huge what snare wires do you use? I don't know. I mean, I believe like a 48 strand is definitely different than I don't even know, 22 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, if you go down to 12 or 16, yes, you're going to hear a difference. If you go up to 40, you're going to hear a difference. But anything in that middle, 20, 24, different materials, different end clips, different spacings. If it's just a snappy wire,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same.
How about bottom head tuning? Because that's always, for me, it's not a mystery. I just crank it on every drum. That's my conclusion. Like, you just crank it no matter what the tuning. Do you have more particular insight than that?
I ask everyone. I probably asked you that question too about the bottom head because that's the one I ask everybody. And
We've probably talked about this. Right? Yeah.
And I remember seeing Vinny play. It was on the
Who?
The buddy Vinny. Vinny Vincent.
Oh, Vincent. Yeah.
He played on that Buddy Rich concert with that brass piccolo.
Yes.
You could see his bottom head was really loose. It was like going crazy.
Oh, I've never noticed that. Okay.
Yeah, every time he hits it, unless he's just.
I just love those ebony heads on those recording customs, man. There's something
Sounds
about that.
so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, his bottom head was really flexing. So for a while there, I was like, well, how low can I take a bottom head on the snare, and what does that give me? So. And I did that for a long time, and Sean Pelton tunes his bottom head a lot lower than almost everyone. So when I was at his studio, that was one of the first studio interviews I did.
Okay.
At his place in New York.
Right.
I was like, all right, I've got to mess with that. So I did that for a long time, just experimenting with how low can you take it. And I'm back to where you are. It's always up to not as high as I used to. F sharp is the note that I go for. Below A440.
All right.
It used to be G, and now it's down to F sharp.
Because
and
why?
Then why? Because some drums I couldn't get the G to come out comfortably.
Okay.
It was like it was taking it just beyond where the drum felt like it could go.
Okay.
And actually, Kenny Sherritts was the one who told me to not go so high. He was like, yeah, you're losing something from the shell when you go that high. And I noticed it. So it's it's F sharp. It's still high. I mean,
yeah.
I think this is an F sharp.
Okay.
It's still up there.
Yeah.
But the thing I'm doing now, again, all this stuff is just me constantly nerding out because I have the space and the time to do it.
Yeah.
Is when I get the head on fresh, and I might go up like 2.5 whole turns or something to get it kind of in the ballpark. When I check the pitch, if it's below where it needs to be, below the F sharp, I don't tighten the ones by the wires. I only tighten the ones away from the wires. So I leave the ones by the wires a little bit looser than the rest.
Okay. I've heard that.
And that just seems to keep the wires from, kind of rattling a little bit extra.
Okay.
But, again, that's all just...
Is that like a half step or anything, or is that...
It's probably a half step.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm only, like, this is a 10 lugger, so... I won't touch these 4, and I'll start with here and just make adjustments to those.
Okay.
If it needs to go like drastically higher, then I'll go back and hit those 4 by the wires. But
so and so we're talking a lot about feel and things like that. Do you ever notice in a recording, or is this really more about acoustically in a room?
Bottom head?
I mean, yeah.
No, it's more of like I've noticed it when I was tuning it lower. I definitely noticed like a wider, like not more rattle, but just a wider sound, maybe more complex sound. I think if you think of like what Sean Pelton sounds like, that's his snare drum sound is distinctly because his bottom head is lower than most.
He sounds all right.
Right. But yeah, for me, it's more like what's the drum giving back to me?
Yeah. Okay. So at some point you moved into like, you know, video world and demoing the stuff for video, and you know, it seems to me like you probably change your recording configuration constantly.
Yeah.
One, how did you did you just dive in because of reviews and start figuring out the engineering thing on your own? And well, let's start with that.
I took recording courses in college, and I always was the one who wanted to have the studio for the band. You know, I was the first one with the 4-track tape machine, and the first one with Cubase on a 8 gigabyte Dell computer. You know, did a whole record with. I was using the 4-track as the mixer, and we were recording into the 1/8 inch input on the back of the Dell. We did a whole record that way.
Wow.
Yeah, having to restart like every 10 minutes because the computer was choking up.
That's awesome. How does it sound now? Have you heard it recently?
It's not bad. I mean, it's not bad. I didn't know anything about EQ, so everything is just like wolfy to hell. But
It's kind of cool.
We were just happy to get it into the computer and hear our songs back.
Yeah, okay.
And plus, the computer couldn't handle any kind of plugins. So when I put a reverb or something on, it was like, nope, this is going to crash.
Right.
That was an 8 gigabyte computer.
That's awesome.
I don't know what the RAM was, probably like 250 megs or something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So I was always into it.
It's amazing you were able to get a whole song into that.
Yeah, I mean, there were days when it was like we spend 6 hours just getting a guitar track because it would just, shit the bed on us every 5 minutes. But, I was in my early 20s. What else are you going to do?
That's the learning time. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I was always into it, but yeah, it was when Modern Drummer went very quickly. Sorry, that drum is buzzing, driving me nuts. Went very quickly from let's do audio to add to the website to video. Like maybe within a year, it was like, I was putting MP3s up versus get a GoPro and put a video of the thing up. So I had to crash course. Luckily, most of the interviews I was doing at that time were based on studio drumming. So I was at Pelton's place. He showed me how to use Ableton Live. He showed me about Drumagog and what is it, BFD. First time I'd ever seen any of that stuff. He showed me all of his tricks of just engineering in a small room.
Okay.
And then that was how I did a lot of interviews. Like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? Because that was 2004.
Yeah.
There weren't a whole lot of home studios at that time.
Yeah, and I know I gotta talk to Sean because like that dude, the fact that he was on it. It's funny. This came up last week. I was talking to Rich Redmond and Sean Pelton came up. So. But
yeah, he was on.
A lot of people have known that he's had that apartment with that other rooms for like forever.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was 2003 or something when he built it.
Yeah.
And then I'm with Aaron Comis's place, so I was checking out all the New York spots. I'm forgetting his name. Sterling Campbell. He had a spot in the music building. Yep.
Okay.
So I was just all these guys in New York are having to deal with this insane setups and getting incredible recordings. So I was just visiting all of them. What are you doing? What are you using? How's this? So I learned real quick that it didn't take a pro space to get good sounds.
Yeah.
And then it was just a matter of just experimenting like crazy every day, hating everything I heard, and then trying too many mics, 16 mics to get a snare drum recording. Yeah. So then, how about just one overhead, a kick drum, and maybe a room mic for that demo?
Right.
So it was just a crash course. The hardest part for me was learning video, honestly.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to figure it out.
Video is a bit of a drag, but yeah, very complicated. It can be complicated. Yeah. So how do you go about, like when you're going to demo something, how do you decide on, let's say, the number of mics? You kind of just said that, but, is it simply like, oh, this is a jazz kit, I'm going to use 3 mics, or like,
usually, or
is it, and you write stuff too, right? Like you make little cool pieces of music and all these things. Is it on that, or what's your thought process on all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, let's just say, for instance, Gretsch sent me their micro kit.
Okay.
And I knew that Giuliano was their guy for that kit at the time when it first came out. Mm-hmm. So I, started listening to a lot of Mark's stuff and how's he tuning this kit and what's the style that he's playing on this kit. Mm-hmm. So then I would program some kind of sequence or something that was in that world, and I would tune it up that way. And then miking wise, it was usually a kit like that. How few mics can I get away with, because that's the vibe. Like, this is supposed to sound like a drum set in the room. Mm-hmm. So it was usually like mono overhead, kick drum, maybe the crotch mic or something to kind of fill it out from the inside. Okay. And that would be it. And then I would also try it with all the mics up just to see what else it would do, and tune it like super low and see what it would do. Okay. So it was usually the first setup was what's the kit supposed to do, and then let me put it in that world. Like if Yamaha sent me the recording custom kit, I'm putting all 16 channels up. Like, we're going to see how much detail can we get out of this kit. Okay. In a snare drum review, I would do 3 mics on the snare. Always. Because I feel like if you only do an overhead for a snare demo, they all sound the same in a lot of ways. Because you're not really capturing all the nuance that the shell is doing. Not that you would ever use that in a mix, but I think for a demo, it's like, this thing's got a lot of overtones and you should hear that. Yeah. And not try to like tweak it out or muffle it out. Like, this is what this shell is doing. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually argue for a mono overhead over a close snare mic if you were just going to do one.
Right.
Just because usually the close snare mic just kind of sounds like dog crap until you put other things into it.
Yeah. Gosh, man.
It sounds weird. I don't know. That's how I think about it. It's like, well, this is if you put your ear on the snare. No one's going to do,
Yeah. I don't know if I was clear. I would always have overheads. There'd always be kick and overheads, and then where do I fill it out? Snare drum demo, I would do 2 on top, 1 on bottom, sometimes 1 on top, 1 on the side, 1 on the bottom.
I see.
And then just mix it so it just feels like what I'm hearing in the room. I used to get a lot of flack for like, man, your demos of snares are so ringy. I'm like, I'm not trying to make a record here. I'm trying to show you what this drum does, and then you can work with it from there.
Right. Because anyone can dent any snare drum.
Yeah. Again, 2 moon gels and every drum sounds the same. Like, what are you trying to do here? Like, I'm showing you all the potential problems you're going to have with this drum.
Right. Anyone can throw the BFD,
Yeah, exactly. Like
BFD, BFD. Yeah.
Yeah, and snare drums especially, I would tune it up as high as I think it could go naturally. Mm-hmm. And then I would do like 8th turn detunes and play the same beat. 8th turn detune, play the same beat. So you would hear it going through all the sweet spots or all the sour spots. And then maybe it sounds great everywhere. Maybe it just sounds like crap until you get down to the low, or it only sounds good high. That to me is how I evaluate the drum. It's like, I'm not gonna not include that funky overtone because it's important to hear that. Don't tune this drum here. It doesn't like it.
Right. And it's like, that could be a good thing. That could be the thing that someone's looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried to make the drums sound as good as possible without glossing over anything. That's always been my approach.
So how much do you feel like, especially on reviews, you're free to EQ?
That's a good question. My strategy, which is changing the better I get at engineering and the better my gear has gotten and the better the room has gotten, where it requires less, but I try to just remove the microphone. Like, that's my objective. If the microphone has a lot of mid-range, I'm going to remove some of that. Like, just trying to get it back to zero. I don't want the color of the mic to affect the outcome. That's been my strategy. Which usually means removing some low mid to get rid of proximity effect and all that kind of stuff that just doesn't sound real.
Right.
And maybe adding some high end to a dynamic mic.
How much are your mic choices going into particular kit or again, are you getting as detailed with microphones at this point, or are you trying?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was reviewing a lot of mics too, so I was like, why don't I just go ahead and do a bunch of shootouts? Like, what's the best kick drum inside mic? What's the best kick drum outside mic?
What's your favorite? Kick in.
The combination that makes a lot of people cringe, but it's perfect, is that Shure, the boundary mic, the Beta 91A.
Uh-huh.
Inside with the AKG D12 VR on the outside.
Is that a newer one? D12 VR?
It's like it looks like the old one, but it's just a new mic. That combination beat out everything I tried. Now there's other things, like if I'm only going to use one mic, the the SEV kick.
I've heard that's great. Yeah.
If one mic inside the drum, it kind of gives me everything I need.
Okay.
But that combination of that Shure and the AKG, I'd compared them all. It just won. It just wins. I know that's more like a live mic for people, but it just works.
I mean, people always ask me about these biodynamic clip-on mics that I use on my toms, and I'm like, well, I've definitely tried a handful of mics, but the thing that, like, it allows me to not have mic stands on the floor. My room is very small, and man, the amount of mental, like not having two extra mic stands that are just taking up more space, like that, and they sound as good as most other mics.
And yeah, exactly.
I'm just going with it. I know it.
I own no.
I know it doesn't look cool. It doesn't look cool. It's kind of a curious choice, but man, it freaking works. And like again, I feel like if the drum sounds great, if the mic's not killing it, then yeah, it's not fighting it.
I've been double micing my toms lately, which I thought was a bunch of bullshit until I did it. I got some custom, I don't know what the company is, what they do. It might be Monster cables. Mm-hmm. So they're just on one XLR. Yeah. And that is just it's been a game changer, especially with floor toms. Floor toms drive me nuts because they're lower and they're further away. Uh-huh. I have a hard time getting it to feel like it should. But that did it. The problem is that lower one picks up a lot of kick drum. So I have to be careful about where I put it. I can't put it where I normally would, at like the 2 o'clock position. It's going to be more over to the side.
This was kind of a recent conversation that I had with an engineer at a studio about miking top and bottom, and I was just kind of commenting on like, why? And his answer to me, and I'm curious if you find the same thing, was it actually helps reduce, sustain. Because there can be some phase canceling that happens in a good way, or at least this is the way I understood the conversation. So it's actually, more sound, except it's actually more, I guess, contained in a certain sense. I don't know. What do you find?
I have to try and test that from that perspective. I never thought of it like that. I think of it as the bottom mic is definitely getting more of the sound. So maybe I don't have to crank the gain as much. Maybe that's the benefit. But I taught this class for Peabody, a recording class, and we did it all over online using audio movers, whatever that plugin is.
Audio movers, yep.
So we were talking about mic tuning and drum tuning and mic choice. So I was like, let me use your ears.
Mic tuning.
Mic tuning, yeah. I was like, let me use your ears to help me decide if this bottom mic really makes a difference.
Okay.
So they were having it cranking through their $1 million monitors and everything. So I did just the top mic, which was the Sennheiser E904, whatever that is, the clip-on.
Okay.
And then I plugged in a same mic into that cable on the bottom. I really couldn't hear it on my end, but they were like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. There's just so much more sound coming out."
You mean only a bottom mic?
No, both. The combination.
Okay.
Yeah, the top only. They were like, "Yeah, it sounds great." I put the bottom on. They're like, "Oh yeah, there's just so much more to work with there. So much more low end and tone."
Okay.
So I wouldn't do it if I didn't have those cables, though. There's no way in hell I would be running another line for that bottom mic.
Are those the mics you're using at home on the bottom?
What am I doing currently? I have the Sennheiser 904s on top, and I have the SE V Beats on the bottom. Similar clip-on dynamic mic.
You're making me think. That cable thing, that's really intriguing to me.
Yeah, unfortunately, I bought them off a friend. I don't know how he got them. So I don't know who, like, I can't find them commercially available. I guess it's easy enough to splice a cable, but I don't know.
No one's going to do that.
Yeah. I mean, someone's got to make it because it's just a mic cable with two jacks on it.
But you've been looking for it and you can't find it?
Yeah, I can't find it. I think it's a monster cable that he used, but
Wow.
I only have two of them, so I can't.
You
do
sure
more than,
he didn't do it?
He didn't do it. He said he bought them and then just doesn't use them. So I traded him like some cheap mics or something for them. Yeah, wow. If anyone can find those, let me know because I will buy
some. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's worth a try if you can get your hands on one of those cables. Because I was like, no way am I going to do this. But after having all these, engineering students who were like, absolutely, we can hear the difference. I'm like, all right. And now I notice it.
Yeah, the one thing that's intriguing to me is like almost out of space in my room, I usually keep an 18-inch floor tom, like it's 13, 16, typically, and then the 18 just sits there. Half the time it's a table, probably 3/4 of the time it's a table. But just because it's in the corner, like I think even when it's tuned well, it doesn't quite speak the way I want it to. And I'd be interested to hear it with a bottom mic. Just, for when I do want to use it, which again is rare, but to have it sound the way I want it to,
18-inch floor toms, man. I can't. I have two of them, and I don't think my ears can hear what they're putting out. It's just too low.
They're super tricky to me. I did a session about a year ago, and Ross, the drum doctor, was on it, and it was and he tuned it. It was his kit and everything, and he tuned it, and I was like, hey, it can be done.
Was that in a big room?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. I don't think
that's part of it too.
Yeah,
that's part of it too. But I've even struggled back in the day when I was using two floor toms live. I had a tech, but whenever I would try to tune, because I'm always like, well, maybe it needs to go higher because it doesn't, because I like my stuff low, and I like it almost flabby. But with that, it's almost like, oh, it's not speaking, and then I come up and I'm like, I don't like it because it feels high, but I wanted that thud. So part of it's like a personal feel thing, but
I wonder if stick choice comes into play too. Like that's something I learned from Chris McHugh. He uses massive sticks. They're like big 2Bs.
Okay.
And I feel like that's kind of one of the secrets to his sound is just a gigantic freaking baseball bat of a stick. I think like using a 5A on an 18, you're getting so little contact on that drum. I don't know. Again, that's something I will be testing for Drum Factory Direct.
I mean, there's no doubt that like a thicker stick is going to give you a different sound, especially on cymbals, right?
Yeah, right.
So presumably, same thing on a drum, right?
You would think, yeah.
Weight and diameter or whatever, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the one time I got to hang with Steve Jordan, he played some drums in the room. We were in Hit Factory, whatever that became in New York. And he had his signature drum there, 13, 6.5 by 13, cranked so high, I thought the lugs were going to fly off. Uh-huh. And I just asked him some question about that, like, how do you get the different sounds out of this one drum? And that's what he did. He played traditional grip, normal way with the tip, hit off center, signature Steve Jordan sound. Mm. He's like, yeah, but if I want it to be thicker, you just flip the stick over, match grip, hit dead center. And it was a totally different sound. It like transformed when I was thinking about it. Otherwise, if he just would have came in and hit the drum, like, yeah, it's a high tuned snare drum.
Right.
But when I was thinking about it and he showed me, it was like, oh, there's definitely more beef, even though this drum is cranked so freaking high, like unbelievably high.
Yeah, I'll do that sometimes, center back of the stick, especially to me, it's almost like I actually played like a jazz gig like a week or two ago, and there was a particular tune where I started doing it almost because that's just the way I picked the stick up or something. But then when I went back to, the normal way, I was like, oh, it's not the sound I want anymore. I put it back.
Interesting.
Because there is a
butt end, you're saying?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So did you make that decision consciously that was the sound, or
it was unconscious? But once I went away from it, I was like, no. I got to go back to it now. Because,
interesting.
And I don't know if that's translating out in the house, but to me, for sure. Here's another interesting thought. The Buddy Rich video, the same one you're referencing with Vinny, Gad plays his sticks backwards when he's playing that show. Ride cymbal 2.
Right.
I've always thought there's something to that, There's something going on there sonically.
I've never done that.
Reason he's doing that.
I mean, his sticks are pretty small.
Yeah, but go back and look.
Yeah.
He's got them backwards.
Interesting. And that
I don't know if that was that day or that particular situation, but
Yeah, it's fascinating. Should ask him sometime if he remembers. I bet it was like, hey,
that one there.
This band is so freaking loud. We're in this big ballroom. He probably wasn't getting as much sound as he needed. That would be my guess.
That would be my guess too.
I hope he wouldn't say, "Oh, I just picked him up wrong," and went with it.
It's got to be it. It's got to. I wouldn't. I don't think with him. There's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also like all your like kind of wacky, super creative stuff, pedals, whatever. I mean, you're going kind of beyond in some things that are pretty cool. What are your favorite, effects? I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Effects to go for, things to do just to get the creative juices going.
It changes often, but usually it's a wave drum or a Nord drum, something that gives me excuse me, something that I start with that so I can play live, and it's something that gives me a melodic element and also a rhythmic element to it. Okay. Like I don't get super inspired if it's just strictly a rhythmic loop often. Okay. I need some sort of...
I mean is, sorry, let me back up. I think what I mean is affecting acoustic drums.
Oh, affecting acoustic drums.
Maybe I'm off base with you. Maybe I don't want to steer you in the wrong way.
No, okay. So yeah, acoustic drums, Usually it's just a combination of reverb and delay that gets me in a mode.
Okay.
Usually, like all the other, like when I first got my studio going back in New Jersey, I found some dude on Craigslist who was selling like 2 racks of effects processors. Like, it was insane. I had to like borrow a friend's truck to get all the stuff.
Okay.
And it was everything. It was all the stuff that came out in the 90s, all the lexicon, like all the
PS90 and all that.
Yeah, all the Roland, the rack mount processors and all that stuff. So, and I didn't spend time learning how to use any of them. It was just turn the knob and make a mess, and then combine different. I had a one of the Mackie Onyx mixers that I think it had 4 auxes. Okay. So I was able to, blend in 4 different combinations of effects, which was super inspiring. Distortion, I think, is fun, but it gets real kind of old quickly for me. It's almost always some sort of, like multi-delay and reverb that gets me just... I'm a Brian Eno fanatic, so anything that puts me in that world, I find I could be more creative on the drums for some reason. I don't know why.
So you like to hear it back when you build something, carve something. You want to go back and play again with the effects going.
Yeah, usually it's make a mess, go too far, dial it back enough to where I can make some sense out of it.
Okay.
That was usually my practice back. We're talking several years when Instagram first started. It was spend a half hour just making a disaster, and then dial it back to where I can perform for 30 seconds and post it.
Right.
I was just trying to, how far can I take it before it just turns into just mud?
Right.
And then, just learning like what happens when you turn up the feedback on a delay too far. Well, you're going to blow your ears out, like that kind of stuff. Had to learn the hard way. And distortion too. Distortion I stay away from because it just makes me want to play like Beastie Boys beats, and that's it. Like, there's nothing
wrong with that, but yes. Yeah.
Whereas an interesting delay with some like a surreal amount of reverb, it just puts me in a mindset of like,
sure,
don't just play beats. Try to find something else to do on this weird contraption.
Yeah.
And that's what turned into like looping the wave drum and sending that through the effects. So then I could just play acoustic drums with no effects over top of that.
Right. How much time do you have to like record? How much time do you have to record like real songs and music because of your gig?
It's not too much. I've kind of even pulled myself out of that scene a bit.
Okay.
Because I kind of got like there's some overseas artists that I was working with. It's just the process of building a kit and trying to decipher what the hell they actually want it to sound like and sending it off, and then 48 hours later they're like, no, this is completely wrong, and I'm like and it's always like the bro deal, like this just isn't worth it for me. So I only record for like friends anymore.
Okay.
So it's if I get one song a week, I'm happy.
Okay.
And it's usually I'll spend a Sunday afternoon working on a track for somebody.
Okay.
Because it became like I kind of loathed turning my computer on for a while there. I was like, this isn't good. I don't want this to be my existence, to where I just don't want to do it.
More about the process, actually, because you felt like to get it right, well, for them, first of all for you, and then for them, it was a drag.
Yeah, I mean, I think hopefully, I don't know how this will change, but just everything being remote for the past 3 years and just not being in a room with other musicians, and it just got to be this like, what the hell am I doing this for? Luckily, I had a few friends who were just constantly outputting stuff. So, and it was like almost everything I did was like 95% where it needed to be first take. So then it was just creatively, what do we want to do to take this? Because it was just, it's not commercial music. It's like Mike Patton, like crazy stuff.
Okay.
So that was fun. It was like, cool, I'll spend a week on one song because I feel like it's a band, like we're working towards something. But when it was just an artist sending me a song and their demo was just really kind of flat, it's like, oh man, I have too many choices to make. Whereas if you were just in the room,
right,
I could play you 3 or 4 different things and we could get to it immediately.
Yeah. The Audio Movers thing is pretty huge for that, It's obviously another step to get it set up so you guys are, working at the same time. But
right.
That could be an option for you where.
Yeah. I mean, I'm dealing more with like amateur semi-pro level as well, so it's not like my expectations have to be
Yeah, well, you have a crazy amount of knowledge and you want to make the right choice, but I can also see it being like it's almost like Michael Phelps going to the local pool and taking on their best swimmer there. It's like, yeah.
I mean, here's a question for you. Like for me, I feel like when I'm left to myself, I overthink it and I make too many choices. I have to make so many decisions about, I'll tune the snare drum to be perfectly with the song, like spend all this time. But then the couple times I've actually been in a real studio tracking with a band in the past few years, almost none of that comes into play. It's like, what's the drum sound like? Cool, let's go with that. Maybe tune it up a little bit or down a little bit. Is that similar for you, or is it not? I feel like when you're in the room with other people, all that minutia is way less important.
Well, okay. I think that's an awesome observation, and this is kind of my ever-changing perspective on all that. Wow. Yes. The short answer is yes. I agree with you. A lot of people, I mean, we're so stylized at this point. The fact that, like, drummers doing home recording where you have all your crap and you can make all these choices. When you really think about it, who besides maybe the engineer is really noticing the difference between all the little changes you're making? Sometimes you change a crash cymbal out or pair of hi-hats, which to me is super important. The hi-hat thing is super important. Most people don't hear it. Mm-hmm. Most songwriters could give a shit. They're worried about getting their song across, or let alone a singer that's not a songwriter. Mm-hmm. And it sounds super insulting, and I don't really mean it that way, but most singers have no idea. They're only worried about how does it feel. Is it lighting them up? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I agree. I do think it's important, especially in this day and age, especially where if you're working with an engineer that you work well with. Well, 2 things. One, that maybe you're new to working with them, and the knowledge that you bring can be super creative, especially if you can do it quick. You don't have to explain it. But if you can do it creatively fast and no one has to really know, except maybe the engineer. Producer doesn't have to know. Artist doesn't have to know. But if they're like, oh, it should be like this, and you go, oh, man, database, oh, I know what to do. Bam. And you play it, and they're like, oh, that's it. Like, all that work that you've done is automatically put into play without you having to say anything. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the thing that, I'm sure you watched Get Back, the Beatle documentary. Right. To me, that was just mind-blowing how no one really gave a shit about any of that. I was just like, oh, man, we are way overthinking everything at this point. They didn't care. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
That kind of made an impression on me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like all the setup and prep beforehand for those guys, but maybe not. I mean, I just did a session for a good friend of mine last week, and she just sent me a rough demo. I was like, just put some drums on this. I knew she wanted big, beefy, dead sounding drums. Because that's what she always likes. But I didn't have those set up. I had regular drums set up.
Yep.
So I just threw the big fat snare drum on, and I would never do that in a recording situation because I would rather hear a low tuned acoustic drum.
Right.
And I threw like the tortillas on the toms and just recorded it, and it sounded great. Like, why do I feel the need to have to swap the whole freaking kit out when I can just get it 80% where it would be otherwise?
Right.
And it was perfect. It was like, fine, cool, one take, done. I'm not going to overthink this anymore. I can't. Right. I can't do it
because most people only hear the 80% or less.
Right.
You know. So I think there's a fine line of like, you've created a survival, getting super intricate with a lot of things, and that's pretty amazing. That career to create, and we can do that in 2022.
Right.
Pretty awesome, And then there's the time where you just got to go like. You got to go knucklehead because that's the right thing. That's the right thing to do.
Oh man, have you ever done this? I just did this last week as well. I won't name the artist or the drummer, but someone I work with often.
Okay.
They worked with a team down in Nashville to do a track, and it came back and it sounded nice. You could tell that it was one of those sessions where they probably did 20 songs in a day. Like, didn't have a whole lot of time to mess with the sonics, but it sounded good, ready to go to mix and master. Well, the artist is like, I really don't like this snare. I don't want to use samples. Can you overdub all the snare hits for me with a deep, fat snare? So I played the song down one time, just hitting all the snare drum notes.
Really?
And I had to learn. Thankfully, there are only like 3 fills in the whole song. So I just had to transcribe where does it go away from the backbeat. But yeah, 3.5 minutes of just hitting backbeats.
That's crazy. I've never done that.
Never done that. I mean, it ended up sounding convincingly accurate. I mean, thankfully I practice to a metronome every day, but that would have been a disaster. And I didn't edit or anything, but it was like, why did we do this? Like, it sounded fine, but for some reason he just wasn't hearing it. He wasn't hearing what he wanted to hear. Okay. So I had to do it. It was the first time I've ever done that. It felt so strange. Someday I will talk to the drummer on the track and be like, I replaced your snare drum, dude.
Your real life trigger. Like Dawson. Yeah.
So strange. I felt like I was in like 1985 or something. Like, yeah. They probably did that back then.
Well, they did it. Ringo did it. Like when the tracks got too dense and they couldn't.
Oh, right.
They couldn't hear the snare. He would go back and do that on certain things.
Well, it worked. It only took me 3.5 minutes versus like dropping in samples and lining them all up and everything. So again, I'm not going to question it. It worked.
Wow, man. Man, I think I've gotten more gear information from you than anybody. Is awesome. Okay, one more super nerdy question because give me your favorite overheads, favorite snare mic. We talked about the kick drum, but give me favorite rooms.
Okay, favorite overhead
too, if you want. Yeah.
Most recently, I've been using that Mojave tube compressor.
Okay.
Which one is it? I don't know. I can't remember the model number, but I'm just borrowing it, so I'm not going to fall in love with it too much. But that's been a game changer for me as a mono overhead.
Okay.
That's like the most high-end microphone I've ever had or used.
You said tube compressor.
I'm sorry, the tube, the Mojave tube condenser.
Okay. Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Mojave tube mic. While I'm talking, it's the MA200.
Okay.
Or the 300, one of the two.
Okay.
That's if I'm spending someone else's money.
Yeah.
For me, I think it's hard to beat the Shure KSM 32s or the 44s.
Okay.
It's just large diaphragm, all purpose. I would use those for overheads. I would use them for rooms if that's all I had. Okay. Small diaphragm condensers. I really like the Aston Starlights. some reason they just sound good in my space.
Okay.
And they have a laser, so you can get your pointing accurate.
Amazing. Okay.
That'd be overheads. What else did you say? Snare drum?
Yeah.
The SE, what is it? 70X7 or something. It's like their SE snare mic. I think it's the X7. That's like their Beta 57.
$100.
Sounds really, really good, and it's a little bit more directional and beefier than a 57.
Okay.
But if I have a 57, I am A-okay with that.
Yeah.
And then I put that side by side with a blue Hummingbird condenser.
Okay.
Which has like the angleable top, which is cool.
Okay.
Bottom, it's like whatever's there. I don't really care.
Okay.
57 usually, or sometimes a like an MXL, something I'm not afraid to blow up.
Okay.
I hate the bottom snare mic anymore. So for me, it's just there if someone needs it. But
right.
I just hate the sound of it. What else? Would you say rooms? Mm-hmm. I haven't found my favorite rooms yet. I just got a pair of... I've been on an SE kick. What are the SEs that I got? SE ribbons. The one X1R, which is a cheap $230 ribbon.
Okay.
They're doing something cool. Before that I was using, everything in mine is pretty cheap. The Audio Technica.
I can just imagine everybody Googling this. Doing it too.
The Audio Technica AT, I think it's 8081 or something like that.
Wow, okay.
I have a pair of those. Those have been my room mics forever, and I think I'll probably go back to them.
Okay.
And they also sound great as overheads on like a bebop kit or something.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, that's it. Everything else has been hi-hat. I still haven't found... I mean, I have one of those 57s that are, like, angled. That has, like, the bent body. Hi-hat mics I've struggled with. 57, if I need it.
To me, those are a lot about vibe. I don't change it a lot, but, like, SM7 is always great. M160 is great. 451 is great. 451? Is that what I'm thinking of? Yes. Yeah, 451. Yeah. I mean, to me, they all work, but they're different. They're different vibes. But I always feel like it's the high. It's like as long as I have the right hi hats up, the mic is fine. You know.
Yeah. I've yet to find one that I'm like, yeah, that sounds amazing. It's just kind of like, okay, that's a little annoying, but that'll work.
That mic also is like, you know, a maybe, a big maybe in the mix.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And what else? I got a set of the Earthworks that I've been messing with. Is spaced pair. I usually never use a spaced pair, but the phasing seems to be a lot easier to deal with those. Okay. I almost never use a spaced pair, but once I got those up, I was like, okay, I can deal with this. Usually it's ORTF or something like that over the center of the kit.
Interesting. Okay.
And what else do I do?
That's
stopped
more
doing...
pain in the ass to me. ORTF.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I printed it out on a piece of paper, so it's two microphones on a stand, so I can just kind of.
Oh, okay. So, it's like a diagram, like
it's like a 100% replication of what it's supposed to be, so I can just set it on top of the mics and angle them and get them in the right spot.
Interesting. That's smart.
Now I picked that placement up from Shannon Forrest because he was using that when I visited his space.
Yep. Okay.
Low overheads, like barely, probably like lip height. So I'm 6'2", whatever that might be, like 5.5 feet off the ground. Whoa. Really low. And it sounded amazing. So like, all right, I want to try that for a while. And it was cool.
Wow. Okay. All right, Mike. Thanks for your time, and thanks for doing this like last minute. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, man. An honor. Thank you.
Yeah, you know how it is. It's good to talk to you.
All right, cool, man.
All right, dude.
Later.